when you boil a podcast network down to it, it's really a mechanism to deliver advertising. What I've done with our shared hosting environment is just kind of added on some community support features so that as a part of the network, you can say, hey, I don't know what kind of microphone to buy. What do you guys recommend? And there's 30 people who will go, oh, you got to do this one or this one or this one or this one, right? So that's what I've done, is just kind of added some accoutrement to the ad network.
Ever been part of something and you didn't like the way it was operating, so you said, screw it, I can go do this myself, I can do this better? I think we can all relate to that. And I think you'll connect with Jason Falls during my conversation as he talks about how he created the Marketing Podcast Network and what's taken him from a few podcasts to 80 podcasts over the past 5 years, and how he looks at his network in a very unique, specific way. I'm Greg Wasserman. I'm the host of Podcast Network Insights, where I bring you the heads of podcast networks, because my 5 years in podcasting, my last 15 years in advertising, my belief that life is about time and relationships, I'm constantly having conversations with podcasters and podcast networks. And I want to bring to you how you can start understanding whether you're a podcaster, if you should join a network, should you stay independent, or if you're a network operator, how you can learn from those that are doing what you're doing in different ways. So sit back, relax, take some notes, and enjoy my conversation with Jason Falls. All right, so Jason, the name of the show is Podcast Network Insights. You run a network. So when I say podcast networks, like, what comes to mind?
Well, I mean, in my brain, my network comes to mind, but I know there are a number of podcast networks out there. I think if I were to explain a podcast network to someone, I would just say it's a group of like-minded shows or producers or podcasts that have a common goal. And there's some technical applications to that. And then there's also some marketing and practical applications to it as well. But it's basically, a group of shows that are all sort of headed in the same direction. And if you have a podcast and you want to be in a group of people that you can lean on for support and advice and all that good stuff, then that's what you need to look for, is a podcast network that makes sense for your show.
So you've been doing this for a while. So how has your network and the thought of what a podcast network is, yet alone part of the question I love to figure out is, what is a podcast? Like what you've described sounds very much like what it's been. So where do you see it going?
Man, that's a really good question. When I started the Marketing Podcast Network, we're working on almost 5 years now, I think. And it was really the thought process back then was, let's gather a group of audio podcasts primarily and have a shared ad server where we could sell ads and split the ad revenue and be a support mechanism for each other in our podcast journey. Marketing podcasts are such a niche that we know none of us are going to get rich as podcasters. It's mostly, thought leadership and lead generation, things like that is what we focus on. And so it's really just, we need a group of people that we can call if we have questions, or I'm entering a phase where I'm having a lot of technical problems. I need to talk to somebody who's done this before or done it longer. And so we started out with that sort of a bunch of audio podcasts who are just there to lean on each other. We've grown enough and the technology has evolved and changed enough that now most of our podcasts are video podcasts or have some sort of video element. And so that changes the dynamic if we had to start from scratch today versus with all that knowledge and where people are in their evolution as podcasters within MPN, versus where we started 5 years ago. We would probably do a lot of different things, because right now we're basically using an enterprise hosting platform that handles video, but video is not its primary, sort of service. So that changes where you're going to host, that changes how you're going to build the network, how you're going to sell ads and everything. So we just had to evolve with the times, and our shows are now at a place where we're trying to serve multiple needs, and not all of the needs of every podcaster are the same thing. So we're trying to be a little bit of everything to everybody, which is a challenge in and of itself, but that's just kind of the state of where we are in the evolution of the podcast world.
So there's so much to unpack. I can just keep pulling threads here. So let's start with one. You run a marketing podcast network, right? So as you said, the core audience is not here to get rich on selling sponsorships. They're I'm assuming the focus is their own products, their own lead generation for their own businesses. Is that right?
Yeah, most of the people who are on the Marketing Podcast Network either are marketing consultants or maybe they have some sort of career as a keynote speaker at conferences. They are fancying themselves or fashioning themselves as a thought leader. Maybe they own an agency or they work at an agency. So I do have a number of podcasts that are literally the podcast for an agency as well. So we've got, individual podcasters who are thought leaders. We've got advertising and marketing agencies who are selling their services. And so really it's a play. I'm trying to think of one, and I can't really think of any across our network of people that are not positioning themselves as thought leaders in their niche, whatever their subject matter expertise is. And that is, basically a lead generation play to say, hey, I want to look smart so that clients will want to hire me. And that's the vast majority of the podcasters we have on MPN.
So then if we go down that, why would someone want to be joining your network versus someone else's? What is it that makes them a good fit for you versus another network that's out there based on just what you described your focus of the network is?
Sure. Well, and before I answer that question, I'll tell you this. I never started MPN with the thought process that this was going to be big or it was going to make money.
Okay.
I started MPN with the thought process, I'm going to have this club of all my marketing podcast friends, and we're going to have a good time doing our podcasts and helping each other out. And if we make enough to cover our expenses, we're going to be real happy. So I am not necessarily a capitalist in this endeavor. But really and truly, what I would say to people is if you want a community of support, people that you can turn to and ask questions of, that you can, meet at the country club for our monthly, meetings every month. We do little monthly creator calls for all the MPN producers. And we, share war stories. We share tips and tricks. If we learn something new or have some new software that might help us all, we share it with each other. We'll bring in a guest speaker every now and then to say, hey, here's something new you could do with your podcast to either make more money if that's what you're trying to do, or help your clients if that's what you're trying to do, et cetera. And so if you want that community support mechanism for what you're doing, and you have a podcast that touches on marketing, and maybe you don't want to have to pay hosting and maybe make a little bit of like Gatorade money. We're not talking, a lot of money here, probably not even talking cocktail money. But if you want to make, enough to buy you a couple bottles of water a month, rather than having to pay the fee to host, then we're an interesting option for you. I mean, you're going to make a little bit of money if you opt into our ad network, but we do a straight advertising revenue share. And so the big shows get the same amount of money as the small shows. So if you're a small new podcaster starting out, it's that validation right out of the gate that, hey, I'm doing something that's actually making a little bit of a difference, which can move you past episode 10, which is the sort of benchmark of you're a podcaster if you make it past 10 episodes.
I always thought that was unique, having met you and talked for a number of years, how you run your monetization. They're like the large one, the small one, shared pool. And it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, but the real money is the lead generation. It's the community component that you're saying that you've got. It's the weekly or monthly calls, right? And shared hosting, shared revenue. But for the most part, someone's going to join your network that's thinking, I just need a community. I know how to generate leads. I want to be the thought leadership. I'm putting everything on me. I'm not putting so much on you as a network.
Exactly. And I always tell people too, when they join the network, you're running your show. And if you want to put ads on your show, that's fine. We'll help facilitate that. If you don't, that's fine too. We don't care. What we want to do is we want to be supportive of our members to say, hey, if you want to join our ad network, We can offset your hosting cost, maybe even pay you a little bit of money every month for being on our network. If you want to promote your podcast to other marketing friendly audiences who might want to subscribe to a show about marketing, well, I got a bunch of shows that we can cross promote you to. So there's a cross promotion mechanism in there as well. If you want to get rich as a podcaster and you're a marketing podcaster, good luck. But if that's your goal, we're not a great fit because again, if I've got a podcast that's got 5,000 downloads a month, that's a podcast that can make a little bit of money. And then I've got another podcast over here that has 50 downloads a month. They're both going to get the same amount of money. What I ask of the larger, download podcasters is invest in the community. Share you can go out and do this on your own and make $150 a month if you want. Okay. You're probably not going to make a whole lot more than that, especially at a $5,000 or 5,000 downloads a month. You're probably not making $150, but let's say you're making $150 a month on your own. You can do that. And if that's your goal to make money and monetize your podcast, then we're not a good fit for you. Go do that. What I'm asking these bigger volume podcasters to do is reinvest in the community. Instead of taking your $150 a month, take $20 a month and let what you would have earned on your own be distributed amongst these other newer, younger, smaller podcasts so that they can have a little bit of community support to give them the confidence and the acknowledgement and validation they need to keep going and keep building their shows.
I love it. So, once again, we've talked, I've known a lot about your business and how you started this. Correct me, but I think you started your network because you were part of another one, realized that wasn't aligned with you, and you felt this is what you want to do. What about what you created here? When someone's listening and someone's thinking, whether they're a network or podcaster, why should I come? And what is it that you created that you didn't see in the market, wasn't aligned with you versus, oh, maybe that is the right network for me?
Sure. The original network that I joined was a more broad business network. It wasn't marketing specific. And hence the opportunity. I realized there's not a marketing specific, at least back then, I didn't think there was. I didn't find one. But the reason I joined that older network with a marketing podcast was they promised revenue share. If I put advertising insertions in my show, they would pay me a little bit of money every month. Again, not getting rich, but hey, cover my hosting costs or something like that. That was one promise. The other promise was they would cross promote me to other shows. And I was there for almost 2 years and I never saw either. They never promoted me anywhere. And I never saw any revenue share, despite the fact that I could see the numbers. I knew there were ads playing on my show. I was delivering inventory for them, but I never saw any money. So I'm kind of a cantankerous, sort of crotchety old man. And I decided this can't be hard. I'm going to go figure out how to do it. And I did. And then I said, you know what? There's not any podcast networks out there that I know of for marketing podcasts. I know a bunch of people in marketing who have podcasts. We'll see if they want to join up. And that's how it started. I think we started originally the first month we had 6 shows, and within, 6 months we had 30 or something like that. So the idea was right. And I solved my 2 problems. I developed an ad revenue share approach that would evenly distribute. Like I get the payout every month or every quarter. And I say, we got 30 shows, divide it by 30, send a PayPal. That's it. It's simple, straightforward, no nonsense. And then I built in a post-roll promo on everybody's show. I basically tell them you have to do the promo. That's part of the joining the network, because we're going to record a little commercial for your show, just like I've recorded commercials for all these other shows. And I'm going to put that in rotation on everybody else's show for you. And then your one post-roll insertion is going to rotate promos for all the other shows on the network to your audience. So I automatically built in the solution to one of the 2 things that I was complaining about on the network I came from. And then I built a revenue share mechanism to solve for the other one. And so that's why I started MPN.
And correct me if I remember correctly, you you started your career here in podcasting as a podcaster before you started your network. Your background's in marketing, but like you got into podcasting be having a music podcast, right? So that's what elevated you to the I should do this from a marketing standpoint.
Well, it's actually it's kind of backwards and funny. So I started working in broadcasting and radio when I was in high school. And at 23 years old, I went to college for it. I got a radio TV degree as an undergraduate. I got a master's degree. And right out of college, I was a network radio producer in New York City. So I have been around some very high quality broadcast production in my career. When podcasts first emerged in the mid 2000s, early to mid 2000s, I hated them because I was used to network quality, and podcasts back then were crap. And I would argue that the lion's share of podcasts today are crap from a quality perspective, but the technology's gotten better, much more accessible. People are used to using computer technology, video and audio editing a lot more than they were 25 years ago. Podcasts in general have gotten better. The technology's helped it lift all those ships to be of a little bit better quality. And so in the early 20 teens, I guess, I'd written a couple of books on social media marketing. I was speaking at conferences, and I decided, okay, I'm going to play with podcasts and see if I like doing this, because I'm still kind of allergic to them, but I'm going to give it a shot. What I ended up doing is I ended up going on when Facebook Live first came out. I ended up opening up my computer. I got into work early because I had a chiropractor appointment first thing in the morning on Tuesdays. So I would get in the office about an hour before everybody else. So what I started doing is I started throwing up Facebook Live and just saying, hey, what are y'all doing today? Here's what I'm working on. And it was completely informal. It was not, I didn't call it a podcast or anything. I just did these Facebook Lives. Well, I realized after a couple weeks, because I had a lot of people I was connected with on Facebook, I had 50, 60, 70 people watching these things live. And I thought, well, that's a show. Not a big show, but it's a show. And so that evolved into, I'm going to record it and I'm going to rip it as an audio podcast and I'm going to put it on YouTube. And that evolved and that evolved and that evolved. Eventually, I kind of honed in and polished everything I was doing into Winfluence, the influence marketing podcast, and kind of rebranded. I was calling it the Jason Falls Show, which is so vain. But I had Winfluence, the influence marketing podcast, and I launched that kind of in combination with my book Winfluence about influence marketing. And I used it as a marketing mechanism for the book and speaking gigs and things like that. And that podcast became my real marketing podcast, which was on the Business Network, which then I moved over and started Marketing Podcast Network with. The music podcast actually came in after I had gotten so burnt out on doing my own marketing podcast, but I didn't want to let go of the skill set. I wanted to keep the muscle, sort of working. And so I just happened to have a friend who had a music blog, and she was interested in maybe doing something cool with a podcast. And, one thing led to another, and I just kind of dove in and we started doing a music podcast. So I've got the music podcast as my primary hobby now. Every now and then I'll rip off a new episode on the influence marketing podcast to make sure that it doesn't go away, but I'm not actively nurturing that right now. And then I'm producing a bunch of podcasts for clients. So what started out as a Facebook Live, me just going, hey, what's going on, y'all, has turned into I'm now basically producing podcasts with about 70% of my time. And that's what I do. And MPN is a part of that and is kind of a side thing that happens over here to nurture that community along. But yeah, it takes up a lot of my time now.
And so if anyone's listening, watching, paying attention to this and as well as other episodes, you'll start seeing a trend. As Jason said, and I was corrected here, he started from a radio background, a broadcast background. And what you'll find is there's a trend between, how different networks start, and yours starting from a radio background, but also that's going to fuel how you operate, how you think about not only the network, but also the creators, the shows that are coming on the network. And so I think that's something that others should be paying attention to when they're considering what is this network, how does it operate, how is it thinking, and what's the background of it, right?
Yeah. The mechanism of a network, when you boil it right down to it, at least in the business context, is this is a shared hosting platform that allows advertising insertions to be placed across all of the shows on the platform that opt into it, that want to do it, so that the network can go sell an ad that is distributed across all the shows. So if LinkedIn Marketing Solutions comes to MPN and says, we want to place an ad for LinkedIn advertising or advertising, what I'll do is I'll say, okay, send me the MP3 file, or we'll write a script, we'll record something. And that one ad then gets played on all, 65, 68, 70 shows on MPN. It is a cost efficient buy for a LinkedIn Marketing Solutions, because the target audience they're trying to reach are marketers who want to place advertising on social networks. And who listens to the Marketing Podcast Network? Marketers. 100% of our audience are marketers, because that's all we are, marketing shows. So it's a very efficient ad spend. It's not going to be the same kind of ad spend that they would spend with Acast or iHeart or any of these major podcast players, where they're buying $500,000 ads that play across millions of downloads a month. But it's going to be super, super cost efficient, because they're reaching the absolute right target audience for what they're selling. And so when you boil an ad network or a podcast network down to it, it's really a mechanism to deliver advertising. What I've done with our shared hosting environment is just kind of added on some community support features, so that as a part of the network, you can say, hey, I don't know what kind of microphone to buy. What do you guys recommend? And there's 30 people who will go, oh, you got to do this one or this one or this one or this one, right? So that's what I've done, is just kind of added some accoutrement to the ad network, is essentially what I've done.
So, you still have a day job, and this is a good portion of what you're doing. If you think about others that are running networks, like that is their career, that is what they're focused on. How have you not taken the business into that realm? What has stopped you? What has either prevented it? When you think about that, like when someone else is running a different network, the way you've operated,
Sure.
Give me some context there.
Well, I told you early on that I am not a capitalist. I am also not a salesperson. And so if I were a really good salesperson, and if I wanted to, sort of beat the pavement, as it were, selling sponsorships on Marketing Podcast Network as my full-time activity, and or recruiting new podcasters to grow the footprint so that we could sell more advertising or charge more for advertising. If I were a good salesperson, I could probably be making, a few $1,000s a month and putting it in my pocket in commissions on selling ads on the Marketing Podcast Network. What has prevented me from doing that is, I'm not a salesperson. I'm a marketer. I like marketing. I'm not a sales guy. I'm not going to, put together a media kit and go try to sell ads all day. That's just not not what I find interesting and fun about the business world. And the other thing is and this is one that's probably more easily overcomable by people who are salespeople, is marketing podcasts are niche. We're not going to go out and get rich on marketing podcasts. If you're Gary Vaynerchuk and you've got millions of people following you on social media, you can probably put a podcast out there that's going to be monetizable to a point where you can pay a producer and maybe put a little cash in your pocket every month. And okay, yeah, maybe that's a good idea. But you literally have to have hundreds of thousands of downloads per month to be able to actually earn a living from a podcast. It's just not a highly monetizable thing unless you have a huge audience. Marketing podcasts are so niche, they're not going to have a huge audience. I promise you, the best, most expert person out there about quilting could have the best podcast on quilting in the world. But because it's so niche, they might only be making $100 a month off that thing, because there's just not hundreds of thousands of people that are going to download podcast episodes every month about quilting. No offense to quilters, perfectly fine, respectable craft. It's just too niche. And I don't think marketing podcasts are big enough to really drive a lot of revenue in that context.
So with that said, not being the salesperson, How do you find sponsorships? How do the host on the network go find them? Are they're the sales team,
Sure.
theoretically, and then you're sharing it all across
Sure.
the network?
We do have an active group of, I would call them sort of an executive leadership team, podcasters who are involved on the Marketing Podcast Network who have started to collaborate with each other and me to develop target sponsor lists, develop a media kit, send some emails, call on some clients. Obviously, a lot of the people on our network are consultants who work with brands, some of them in the technology space, some of them in the marketing and agency space. And so we have this kind of informal word of mouth way of putting MPN in front of the right sponsors from time to time to be able to sell enough ads to make it worth keep doing. But again, I don't think any of us are under any illusion that we're going to sell tens of thousands of dollars in advertising a month, unless or until we get a lot bigger than we are. Because right now, to be honest with you and transparent, we've got, I think, 68 or so podcasts on the ad network. We've got about 87 total podcasts, but some of them are either thought leadership shows that don't want ads and things like that. So we have a little bit bigger footprint. But the ad network itself is driving roughly 18 to 25,000 downloads a month. When you're going to a LinkedIn marketing solutions that's selling or that's buying ad packages from iHeart for $1 bazillion, they're looking at, 23,000 downloads a month. And they're like, that's a rounding error, man. It's not even a rounding error. So we have to be able to have a contact there to convince them, hey, the efficiency of the spend on this audience is worth that investment. And so that's what makes us a good buy. And we've been fortunate enough in situations of advertisers of that size that they're like, yeah, we think that's a good efficient spend. We'll add you to the budget. A lot of times we get a lot of technology, marketing technology startups and whatnot that want to get the word out there, that want people to try their software. That we're a real good audience for that because, again, we're talking directly to marketers and only marketers. So you're not wasting your spend at all there. You're getting in front of the right audience. And it's really just that word of mouth. Some of our sponsors have been clients of the podcasters on our network who the podcaster says, hey, my ad network reaches a bunch of marketers. Would you like to look at that package? And so it's really more of a word of mouth thing for the size we are. And that's okay for now. Eventually, hopefully we'll get a little bit bigger and need someone to devote a little bit more time to selling ads on the network. But for now, we're pretty comfortable where we are.
I like it. If you think about it, I think you were like 40 shows. You've doubled in size over the last few years since we first started talking.
Mm-hmm.
You started with 6 and 5-6 years ago, whatever the math is on that. So it's impressive. Why have shows then either stayed or left? And if they've left, have they left because, and we can assume they quit podcasting altogether, but let's forget about those people.
Sure.
Those that decided, you know what, I'm going to leave, either they just go independent or they joined another network, and for what reason?
So we haven't had a lot of people leave. We have had several podcasts go dormant or stop publishing over the years. That happens. And sometimes it happens for very good reasons. And sometimes it's just that they just didn't like it or didn't have the time or whatever. With anybody who calls me and says, hey, I'm not really publishing anymore, so I don't want to be a part of the network, I normally say, hey, if you're not joining another network, or if you're not just pulling and going out independent, the hosting's there. I'm not charging you for it anyway. Let's just leave it up there. It's evergreen content. There's no reason to take it down. You're still on the network. We can still put ads on your show. If someone downloads your show 5 years from now, they might hear an ad. That'll still work. And that's the vast majority of the shows that have gone dormant. I think I can count on one hand the number of people who have left and just didn't like what we were doing or didn't like the support or didn't want to be in the community. And the ones that have done that have done it for reasons that MPN doesn't have any responsibility for, or is it was just for, oh, well, I've got a bunch of other friends on this other network and I want to go join that. Or I just don't like, I think I want to monetize my podcast and I don't want to share revenue anymore. So we just don't have that same alignment. So I'm going to go do something else. And that's fine. I've never had anybody say, don't like you guys, I'm quitting. So, and again, I can count on one hand the number of people that have literally left versus just not published anymore.
I mean, it also is a testament, I'm guessing, based on the fact that you left one network, started your own. So, like people attract like people. So, whoever you're attracting buys
Yeah,
into what you're offering, but also it aligns with where they are in either their business, the way they're treating their podcast with inside their business. That makes the NPN a valuable option for them.
sure. Yeah.
So we've talked a little, or you've mentioned tech a few times in different phrases, but besides just the tech of the hosting company that you're using, you've been in the network for 5 years. So you've been podcasting for a while. You've come from broadcast. Where does tech and the knowledge that you bring as a network operator come into the value you're providing to the network as a whole?
Well, specific to the network, I mean, there's really two things that you are concerned about. Number one, how can I manage the ad inventory and place it where I need to place it and put the limits and caps on the volumes and things that I need to do. And that's all in your hosting provider. So we at the Marketing Podcast Network, we've always been a megaphone.fm customer, and that's where we host our stuff. There are others that I've reviewed that have a lot more bells and whistles and features, and maybe one day we'll migrate somewhere else. But if you think migrating one podcast is hard, you should think about migrating 86 of them. That's kind of a nightmare because you got to have 86 people buy into it first. And then you got to have 86 people hold their hand while you teach them how to use the new platform second. So it's a monster. So moving and migrating hosting platforms is somewhat preventative just because it's a pain in the butt. But the hosting platform is going to provide you with just about everything you really need in terms of tech to run a network. The other thing that is challenging, and I don't know that there's a good solution to this, is measurement and analytics and reporting. All of the podcast hosting platforms provide some level. Well, they'll tell you how many downloads and how many streams, which are different than downloads, and they'll give you a geographic footprint, and they'll tell you, what service is pulling them, Apple versus Spotify versus TuneIn, whatever. They'll give you day parts and day times when your podcast is listened to the most popular and most popular times or the most in a week or things like that. But no one is able, and this is the inherent challenge of podcast technology, no one is able to really tell you anything demographically about your audience. They're not really able to tell you a whole lot in terms of why they listen or how long they listen. There's some metrics that kind of touch on that. But the analytics for podcast, despite the fact that it is purely in the digital realm, are really kind of amateur and crappy. Now there are some platforms that you can pay extra for that probably do a lot more, type technology analysis and whatnot on demographics and align it with internet service provider data and things like that and triangulate things. And you can get a better, deeper read if you're investing more money in analytics. But your analytics is probably going to be your biggest challenge because when you're trying to sell an advertisement to an advertiser, they want to know how many people are listening. Are they understanding the message? Are they taking action? The taking action part is impossible, almost impossible, because in an audio format, nobody's clicking on a link, right? So you don't know if they're actually going to your website and purchasing something or, filling out your lead gen form because they heard it on a podcast. The podcast is part of the media mix that hopefully you're hitting them from a bunch of different places and it's adding to that success. Podcasting alone is not going to convert a lot of direct transactional customers. And so that's a difficult challenge. And I don't think that's one that anybody in the industry solved very well. And I don't foresee it being solved easily anytime soon. So it's one of those things where you have to kind of say, well, podcasts are great for branding and awareness, which you measure through surveys and things like that outside of technology, podcast technology. And it's good for supporting as a component of the media mix, larger campaigns that might be driving someone to a location or a destination or a transaction. So that's where your tech is going to be primarily focused from a network perspective. And we can go down all kinds of rabbit holes on the tech for other things.
Well, I guess, yeah, go down the tech of other things, less on the marketing side, because I'm guessing if you've got a network of 80 shows that are marketers, they understand how to take the content to remarket it and
Yeah,
reproduce what they need from that.
that's right.
But from a podcast standpoint, the podcast tech, like you're literally the guy in the industry who's guiding everyone else in the network. So where do you focus on?
Sure.
Video is being the big piece. You talked about how your network's evolving from video where it used to be. So how much of it are you paying attention and then driving that back to the 80 people on the network saying, here's a tool I think we should be using. Here's a production platform we should be using. If there's anything that we need to make your lives easier as a podcaster beyond just the advertising side.
Yeah, the tech stack, as it were, for creating podcasts, I try really hard to say, hey, here's what I do, but I'm not the know all end all to this. And it's going to depend on your own tastes, because a lot of people edit in Adobe Audition for audio and Premiere Pro for video, but other people use Final Cut Pro for video and all these other things. There's a variety of softwares out there that are very, very good for the main build your, edit your podcast. Some folks still use Audacity, which, is a little bit, sort of pedestrian for my tastes. I use all the Adobe stuff. I've always used the Adobe stuff for editing. And so I try to tell people, look, here's what I do, but what I do is not necessarily what you should do. You need to go explore the different types of software that are out there and do what you're comfortable with. I like the Adobe suite. I've used others. I'll recommend them depending upon what someone tells me they're, used to, what kind of user experience they like. In terms of post-production, though, you have to remember, if you're doing video, there's a very good chance that, as a marketer, that you need to cut up those social media clips and put those clips out there for people to drive people to your podcast. Again, this is where the world of AI has become incredibly useful,
Agreed.
because video and audio editing, when I first learned how to do it with a razor blade and an actual audio reel-to-reel tape, I'm not lying, digital editing was referred to, you might slice off the end of your digits with a razor back in the day. So when you are, I don't know where I was going with that, but let me get back to
Just technology. It's AI's helped us go from cutting tape to
exactly.
where we are now.
You're exactly right. So AI has made audio and video editing so much easier and so much faster. However, if anybody has ever tried one of these, like an Opus Clip, or even, I know you and I both use Riverside, and so Riverside has the ability to kind of use AI to create clips in it. There's all these softwares out there that'll do that for you. If you are hitting create my social clips and you're downloading them and you're putting them on the internet, you're embarrassing yourself, because the AI is never going to be able to polish it so that it's really good presentation. You've got to let it create the clip, but then you got to go in and say, ooh, that's an awkward edit. That's an awkward jump cut. That needs a fade. Like, you got to go in and tweak it. There has to be a human element on top of the AI to make it actually work and work well. And that's the mistake most people make with AI, is they hit the button and they assume they're done. And that takes the human brain out of the equation. Let the computer do the time-consuming stuff, but make sure your human brain is checking it, massaging it, polishing it, so that it actually ends up with an end product that you can be proud of. I love the AI tools because they make things so much faster. I can do transcriptions and show notes in a matter of minutes versus a matter of hours back in the old days. And I can do these social media clips. I can probably produce 5 to 10 social media clips for a 30-minute podcast in a half an hour, because I've used the tools enough and I can do it quickly. Most people take a little bit longer the first time through. And so that would have required probably several hours worth of work, even 3 or 4 years ago. So I love the AI tools. They're great, but you've got to have that human layer on top of it to make it work right.
I mean, look, we connected over when I was working at Cast Magic, an AI tool,
Yep.
and that's how we connected. So I think about where it's come since then. Yeah, completely. So I guess from that point, what's next for your organization? We're in 2026 here for anyone that's listening to this right now, but like, where does MPN go from here?
I honestly want more than anything for the executive committee team, the podcasters in my network that have sort of raised their hand and said we want to get more involved. I want more than anything to transition sort of the ownership of the network to the network itself, so that
Mm.
each of the podcasters is an owner of MPN and it is sort of run by the community. I don't want, I never started it as a mechanism for me to own it or for me to make money on it or anything like that. I really wanted to build something that was valuable to the community. And so I want the community to be able to benefit from that in any way they can. So my hope is that we continue to offer up our unique selling proposition that if you market to marketers, 100% of our audience are marketers. I hope that we continue to sell advertising and help sponsors reach those marketers out there with their message and are effective in doing so. I do think that we're going to have to start looking into video first solutions in terms of hosting and technology. That's just going to be required. But I also have optimism that the hosting platforms are solving for that. I just got an email today or yesterday that Apple is now expanding to video in
Yep.
Apple Podcasts. So
We
I
are
have,
looking at the hardcore at rss.com. So
yeah,
yeah, that is, and we've been waiting for that moment. So yeah, that is definitely on the forefront of everyone's brain.
yeah. So I think those tools and those solutions are going to continue to meet the needs of podcast networks and individual podcasters. It's probably going to go slower than we all want it to go, especially someone like me who's probably been yelling for this video stuff for, quite a long time. But at the same time, I think that's going to be something that we have to keep our focus on. And I just hope we continue to grow and continue to be successful. Again, we never had the goal of being huge and making a lot of money. We just had the goal of having a bunch of marketing podcasters who have a resource with a group of people that they're a community of that they can lean on. And I just hope we continue to do that.
So would you ever sell? If you want to bring the team in and kind of take a step back, would you think about selling it and going, you know what, let's have someone actually run this who's either a salesperson, who's a business, who wants to keep what you've created from a community standpoint, but actually solidify it from a different standpoint of the business component?
I would only sell it to the community of podcasters in and of themselves first. If they put together some sort of, conglomeration and bought it from me, I would sell it to them.
Like a co-op. There
Like
you
a
go.
co-op. Or B, if I would sell it to a third party as long as they contractually agreed to protect those sort of community components in it and not just run it over and try to make it a money-making machine and just, I wouldn't sell it out. I would sell it, but it would have to be to someone who was invested in the community and knew and contractually obligated themselves to protecting the community as well.
Love that. So if you were to redo this, now knowing that video, how would you have changed the way you've built your network?
Wow. That's a really good question. Man, I honestly, I haven't given that a whole lot of thought, but I think if I were to just sort of walk through that, brainstorm that quickly here as I'm trying to think of a good answer, I think I would, look for a software platform that allowed, instead of being a podcast platform, was a, television network platform where I could have all of my video shows on a server so that I could serve up video advertisements the way I'm currently serving up audio advertisements and build it out that way. Because in that context, solving the audio is easy. You just take the video, rip off the audio, and post it on the audio platforms, right? That's not hard. Going from audio to video is very hard if you're not a video person. So I think if I had it all to do over again, I would start with some sort of platform or software or mechanism that allowed me to do with video what I'm doing currently with audio and build it from there so that it's more of a TV network, if you will, with the different shows. And, maybe have a massive YouTube channel that has all kinds of revenue. That would be amazing.
So it would have been like the old school MCNs, multi-channel networks back in the day. You would have gone that route instead of the podcasting core audio component.
Yeah, I think so. Because again, the core audio component is an easy solution once you have, if everybody's video, and everybody's doing video. There's obviously some exceptions that you want to make sure that the audio translates well. But solving audio once you have video is easy. Solving for video is not easy. But if you start video first, the audio solution kind of takes care of itself, in my opinion.
Interesting. Well, you've heard it. Jason would say he would have gone back and done an MCN instead of the audio network that he's got, and now he's moving to the video realm. So that changes. But at the core, as you've said, the way you're looking at a network, the way you've operated your network is very much a community focus. How do we ultimately provide you the value that you need as a marketer so you can do your day job, which is ultimately the marketing, right?
Exactly.
So with that, what is one podcast that you think people should know about that they don't?
Ooh. I'm not going to give you one. I'm going to give you two.
Okay.
There is, for the marketing advertising world, there is a podcast on our network. It's my former boss. I used to work for Cornet, which is an advertising agency in Lexington, Kentucky. And Christy Heiler is the owner of Cornet. And she did some research a few years ago and discovered that less than 1% of advertising agencies in North America are owned by women. And that just blew her mind and probably pissed her off. And she started a podcast called Own It, which interviews female agency owners and endeavors to close the gender agency gap, or gender gap in agency ownership in the advertising marketing world. And it's a weekly podcast. The conversations are really fascinating. I also produce the podcast, full disclosure. So I listen to every word of every episode. And even not being at an advertising agency anymore, but still being in the space, I learned something every episode, some inspirational thing or an idea from one of the owners that she interviews. And I think Own It is one of the better advertising podcasts out there. And it's in pursuit of a very, very good cause to close that gender gap. The other one that I would throw out there for you is Cautionary Tales, which is Tim Harford. It's not a marketing podcast. It's actually in the Pushkin family of podcasts. And Cautionary Tales from Tim Harford, he's with the Financial Times in London. And the storytelling there is just fantastic. And he's typically telling stories that have some sort of business impact or translation into the business world that I think marketers, advertisers, business owners, and whatnot can get something out of. Worst case scenario, you're going to be entertained because he's a fantastic writer and a fantastic storyteller. Best case scenario, you're also going to have some takeaways for your business from it. There you go.
I love it. Thank you for those two. There are two new ones for me. And I think the first one, she's definitely got a great cause.
Yeah.
So to give me podcast, what's one book recommendation you have?
I got really motivated about marketing and advertising back in the early 2000s when I read the book Brand Hijack by Alex Whipperfirth. It's an old book now, but I think the tenets are still very much at play. It's sort of a word of mouth marketing book. It kind of talks about brands that sort of catch fire and you don't really know why they catch fire. And it was a predecessor to the cacophony of noise that we got from social media marketing books in the mid 2000s to now probably. And it was really like, here's what brands can do to empower their customers to lead the way. Let your customers own the brand. Let your customers take the brand forward from a marketing perspective. I was really inspired by that book, and I refer to it from time to time, even now, even though it's 20 some odd years old. But Alex Whipperfirth, Brand Hijack, highly recommend it. A little outdated, but I think the principles are still true.
Thank you, Jason. Well, I guess last question I've got is, the person that's probably listened to this is either a fellow network operator like yourself or a podcaster, someone in the podcast industry. Any last words of advice, any last things you'd want to lead them as we think about what a podcast network is and joining a podcast network?
Always do good, always be kind. If you can check those two boxes, with what you're doing with your network or your business, you can sleep at night and you're probably making the world a better place. I try to kind of guide myself by that. Always do good and always be kind. I think that's a pretty good way to go about it, regardless of what your job is.
I'd say too. I think that's why we get along so well, because of that whole philosophy.
Yeah.
Well, Jason, thank you so much. I appreciate joining Podcast Network Insights and sharing some wisdom.
Greg, thanks for having me, man.
Well, you've made it this far, so allow me to give you my 2 cents on my conversation with Jason. As I said at the beginning, if you don't like the way you're doing something, go do it yourself. And that's exactly what Jason did when he created the Marketing Podcast Network. I think we can all relate to that. And hopefully you did as you were listening to the conversation. But he also created this, as he joked, as non-capitalistic, that there actually is a way for you to run a network, to create a collective around a niche, around your own passion point, going, no one else is doing this. I want to do this myself, and I'm going to bring people together and offload some of that work that maybe other network operators are doing and go, I can still do this. I don't have to be the largest. I don't have to be the biggest, but there's still a way to bring people together. So when you think about that, and you think about the conversation I had with Jason, hopefully these are some of the things you walk away with. As I say, life is about time and relationships. I live on LinkedIn, so please reach out, connect. The reason I'm able to have these conversations and understand what people are doing is through the conversations I get to have with you. So follow me on LinkedIn, read my newsletter, like and follow this podcast, share with others that are in the podcast space, and keep listening. Thanks a lot.